Voyage to Mars, Chapter 1, Voyage to the South Pole. And now there came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold. The ice mast high came floating by, as green as emerald. Ancient Mariner. November 10th, 1891. Our ship, the Albatross, put out from Melbourne Harbour, and after 2 weeks' sailing reached the Antarctic Circle, which, sweeping in a 10,000-mile circuit around the South Pole, marks the boundary line between the South Temperate and Frigid zones. It was the beginning of the Antarctic summer, and the sun was approaching his greatest southern declination, which he reaches on 21st of December. Revolving in a spiral circle around the horizon he diffuses. Save when mists or tempests prevail, his cheerful though feeble light through the Antarctic summer, which continues 6 months. It was now midnight. Note: at the polar regions, the terms morning, noon, evening, and midnight are inapplicable, as it is either continual day or night for half the year. It was now midnight, and the solar luminary presented the usual extraordinary appearances displayed in these regions. It hung about 10 degrees above the horizon. Its disk was oblate, the effect of atmospheric refraction, of a deep blood-red color, and traversed with parallel bands resembling those sometimes seen on the planet Jupiter. It was surrounded with magnificent perihelium, and at its greatest crimson halo poured radiant beams across the waters, tinting the waves with rosy and golden hues. The sky presented a beautiful appearance. Overhead, a deep indigo blue; to the south, a brilliant red; to the north it seemed hung with shadowy veils of gorgeous purple, mingling with the misty vapors that floated over the sea. Our ship was sailing in the midst of a scattered flow and uncleared stream, the wind being adverse. As volumes issued from the funnel, they were condensed into icy mist, falling in little showers on the deck. One of the sailors, on lookout on the foretop cross trees, called out, "Icebergs ahead!" "Where away?" asked Captain Anderson, who stood with his officers on the quarter-deck. "2 points off the weather bow." The bold navigator who seeks to explore the polar region is confronted with many obstacles and dangers unknown in other parts of the world. Dame Nature, like man, has her variable moods. She can be rude, rough, and inhospitable, as well as genial and inviting. Like the god Janus, she wears 2 faces, one for peace, the other for war, and like the Eastern magician, can blow hot or cold with the same breath. She is exceedingly jealous of any intrusion on her savage polar domain, and whenever man seeks to penetrate her region of eternal frost, she obstructs his course with drifts and barriers, blinds him with fogs and mists, buffets him with freezing tempests of snow and sleet, and assaults him with bergs and billows. And now a great chain of icebergs came looming up in one unbroken line from the southern horizon. As they elevated their towering crests above the waters, they looked like frowning giants arising from the deep to guard the frontiers of the polar monarch. These stupendous masses, which are disrupted fragments of vast shoreline glaciers, are, in the Antarctic regions, of far greater dimensions than those around the northern pole or North Atlantic Ocean. Floating in the tow of the great polar drift currents, their foundations immersed to a depth of 6 times their altitude above the surface, they advance majestically forward in spite of winds, waves, or tide. In these regions there are sometimes seen from 1 or 2 miles long and 400 or 600 feet high. "Now, boys," said the captain, "you'll see the most magnificent sight in the world." Captain Anderson was a splendid specimen of the old-time sailor, few of whom are seen nowadays. He was about 70, of medium stature and Herculean frame, a massive head clothed with iron-gray hair, bronze complexion, deep-set, penetrating steel-gray eyes, such as seen among men born to command, a voice like a lion, a courage and a daring that would face the devil himself. All on board swore by the grand old commander of the Albatross. As the long lines of bergs arose in full view, a panorama of wondrous beauty was displayed before us. Brightly illuminated by the sun, it seemed as if a chain of glittering gems overspanned the deep. Sometimes they reflected from their crystalline surfaces dazzling sheens of light, or like Immense prisms scattered the solar rays in gorgeous rainbow colors over the waves. As they drew near, they gradually underwent extraordinary transformations of shape and resembled a metropolis of giants. Stupendous castles, temples, and pavilions apparently of marble, alabaster, and porphyry, with soaring pinnacles, minarets, battlements, and vaulted portals, floated in stately grandeur over the waters. Colossal towers mingled with floating mountains, whose interiors were hollowed out in tremendous caverns. We stood in silent wonder as this magnificent pageant advanced towards us. We carefully steered the ship through the narrow, tortuous channels lying between them. They were like cannon cat. They were like cannons cut through floating mountains, and their hollow caverns re-echoed the sounding waves like thunder. After a few hours we passed through the line which floated to the north, and finally disappeared from view below the horizon. We had now reached the 70th parallel, and entered that broad bay bounded on the west by the shoreline of Victoria Land, and on the east by an immeasurable ice field, and which, according to our present knowledge of these regions, offers the only accessible route to the southern pole. This bay, beginning at Cape North, penetrates to the 78th parallel, a distance of 600 miles due south. With a bright sky, propitious wind, and clear sea, we made full sail and entered the bay, passing Cape Adare, Mount Sabine, and the Admiralty Range. The coastline was illy defined. Enormous ice cliffs and low ice fields obscure its boundaries. We passed Mount Melbourne and Prince Albert's Mountain, with other ranges from whose summits the descending glaciers swept over valley and shore, abruptly terminating far out at sea in stupendous ice cliffs. On the fourth day we came in full view of that famous Antarctic volcano, Mount Erebus. From its snow-clad summit, nearly 15,000 feet high, issued vast volumes of flame and smoke. Nearby was Mount Terror, an extinct volcano formed by its projection into the sea, Cape Crozier. We had now advanced nearly to the 78th parallel, where the great ice barrier discovered by Sir James Ross rose before us, a massive and perpendicular wall of ice with a seafront from 150 to 200 feet high, flat and level at the top, stretching to the east as far as the eye could reach. The facade of this tremendous barrier resembles a solid wall of azure-tinted crystal crowned with a battlement of frosted silver. Impregnable to the assaults of tempests and billows, it has stood from the immemorial ages, built of the glacier, cemented by the frost and nourished by the everlasting snows. We coursed along this barrier many miles to the east, far beyond the limits of Captain Ross's sailing, where his progress was prevented by the ice. The sky now became overcast, the crimson halo surrounding the sun disappeared, and his light changed to a dull and angry glare. The splendid hues that glowed from the face of the barrier and surrounded icebergs died away like the colors of a dissolving view, and a dense fog settled over the sea, immersed everything in gloom. "There's a storm brewing, boys," said the captain, "and it will be a rouser. Keep your peepers wide awake, and be lively on your pins when it comes." We clewed up sails and prepared for it. The wind soon began to blow a gale from the northeast, bringing loose masses of drift ice down on us. Ere long we were completely beset and had no sea room. Further progress was impossible, and we were compelled to lie close hauled to. A blinding storm of snow and sleet sprang up, and the deck spars and rigging were speedily encrusted with ice. The storm increased in violence, and the wind, shifting to the north, forced us to leeward. We got up steam, veered the ship about, head to the wind. For a while she held her position, but the sea gradually drove her backwards in dangerous proximity to the barrier.